I'm Amy Julia Becker, and this is Reimagining the Good Life, a podcast about challenging the assumptions about what makes life good, proclaiming the inherent belovedness of every human being, and envisioning a world of belonging where everyone matters. Today, Adrian Wood and I are talking about community, belonging, autism, and the ways our children have helped us to grow up. It's a conversation I think you'll really appreciate. If you don't know her already, Adrian is the creator of the vlog, Tales of an Educated Debutante, which hundreds of thousands of people follow along to know her family's story. She has a PhD in educational research. She contributes to Today Parents, The Today Show, the Love What Matters blog. She also has a recent book, which we're talking about today, called Autism Out Loud. She lives in rural Eastern North Carolina with her family. One other quick announcement before I turn to our interview. My Reimagining Family Life with Disability course is available in a couple of different ways. You could use it as an online self-paced course. You can gather a group of people and use the videos that are available online for small group time together. Or you can join me live and in person on May 3rd in Bethel, Connecticut. So we will put a link to the show in the show notes for more information about all of these options. But I would love for you to benefit from the content of this course, Reimagining Family Life with Disability. And now to my conversation with Adrian Wood. I am sitting here with Adrian Wood. And Adrian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. What a treat.
It is a treat. I have followed you, I guess, on Facebook, although you're also now on Instagram, for many years. And we actually share, I guess, I don't know if that Edenton is your hometown, but it's my hometown and where you have lived and raised your family for a long time, and not a place that many people know about. So I'm thrilled to be sitting here with someone who has not just those things in common with me, but also some family similarities, as well as just some of the things that we enjoy thinking about. So I'm sure that's also true of many of our listeners. And I'm excited to introduce them to you and to your new book, Autism Out Loud. So I thought, by way of introduction, maybe you could just tell us about you and your family and how you became this person who has, thousands of people kind of following along with your family's story.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. What a treat. I've known Amy Julia through the radar of others for a long time, so this was a nice thing for me. So I, like you, am from Eastern North Carolina. I grew up sort of in about an hour down the road as a crow flies in Nash County, and we've been in Edenton now for 22 years. Edenton is this tiny enclave, a northeastern part, kind of closer to Virginia than anywhere else. And what a place to raise a family. And I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. She said, how do you know, like, if you should move and get more services? And I said, I don't know. I am where I am. But when Amos was getting a diagnosis, the geneticist I said to her, what do we need to do for him? And she said, the best thing you can do is be PTA president.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, I'm already that. I was trying to see if I could get rid of doing that, So that's a fun conversation to have. But I am married to Thomas. We've been married 22 years. He is a criminal attorney in a town called Gates, which makes Edenton look like a metropolis, and travels around. We have 4 children. We currently have 3 teenagers, which is really fun. This summer, they're going to be working at the same restaurant, sharing 2 cars. So I'm like ready to start a reality show to watch.
Yes, there you go.
One is a busboy, one is a hostess, and one is a waiter. And then our littlest Amos is 11. He's in 4th grade. He has autism and a rare genetic disorder called MSL2. And, we're just hanging on for the ride. I think it's a good life. This book, Autism Out Loud, I always wanted to write a book. I'm not really a great person with deadlines. So I had 2 friends that sort of kind of tricked me into it. And that was helpful, though, to kind of keep me on target of what we needed to be doing. But I'm really proud of it. And I don't know if you feel this way, Amy Julia, but it seems so weird to say that about your own book, but it's a good book. And it's the book I wanted. I went to Barnes and Noble. I drove to Greenville, which, as you know, is about an hour and 20 minutes away. And I went in there to look for the book on autism 8 years ago, and there weren't any. There was a little section on the bottom, and I bought a book about Down syndrome because that was the closest book I could find. And I think it was called In Her Father's Eyes, written by a dad. He had his daughter on a backpack, and it was really a good book. So yesterday I was at a Barnes and Noble in New York City, and the disability section's still on the bottom shelf. You know, like you got to lie in your stomach, like you're, got your face in a crab hole. But there was the word autism, and there were about 9 books in it.
Yeah.
My book was not in there, but I put it in there for a picture. So we've made a little progress, right? Now, if we can just get the section to come up, we'll be in good shape.
I love that. And yeah, just to give listeners a little bit of a sense of the book, it's it definitely through 3 different mothers' eyes is telling the story of your families, but you do go kind of topic by topic through some different, I think, really kind of frequently asked questions, although again, it's answered as a story about whether it's education or family or siblings or the hard stuff, grief, joy, and it's really, I really appreciated it as a mother. And it's so interesting you say that you got a book about Down syndrome, because for me, one of the things that was interesting in reading your book was that even though Penny does not have autism, I also was like having my husband read some things where I was like, this reminds me of Penn when she was little. Like there is some just shared sensibilities, both in terms of, I guess, the actual diagnosis, but also just the experience of a family with being given a child who is different than you expected, which of course is true for all of our kids, and yet is particularly true in our cases for Penny and for Amos. So I wanted to ask you just, I guess this is 2 questions, but one, just how do you explain autism in general? Like, what do you say if someone's like, oh, what's autism? Like, what does that mean? And I know that means something in both a broad sense, but then also there's this like particular child in your life who is particularly Amos and who has autism. And so I just would love for you to talk about autism in general, but also like autism and Amos.
Right. Well, I'm still learning what autism is, I think, for us and for him. We had gone to see a pediatric psychiatrist at Duke when he was about 6. We were really struggling. He was having these meltdowns. You never knew I didn't know what caused them. I had no idea what to do. And so I hauled him up to Duke, and Dr. Copeland, who I love, said very quietly after I'd, probably just vomited all my feelings and emotions, he said, what you're talking about is anxiety, not autism. And that was a really pivotal moment for me. And in the book, we have a chapter on anxiety.
Yeah.
And it's honestly about the relationship of autism, ADHD, and anxiety. They're siblings, is how he describes it.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to use research and data. I have a background in educational research, as well as our feelings and thoughts, so we want to feel like you're walking away with like, this is really helpful information too. She gets it too. So I ebb and flow. I think a few years ago, a post came up yesterday and it was like, I hate autism. Well, now I think I'd say to you, I don't. I think autism is sort of what makes Amos interesting. It also makes some things hard, but trying to separate out the anxiety and the autism, he's in this he's funny. He is funny and he's bright. And it's like, how do you pull out his best traits and use them for good? I'm sure you as a mom, the same thing. How do you have him reaching his full potential? And what is it?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't know. But this morning, he's very against you watching the show that he's watching. So he's like, don't look at the TV, and my son Thomas, who's 19, because siblings are siblings. Like they just are going to treat you the same.
Yeah.
So my 19-year-old, who's a freshman in college, will say, oh, are you embarrassed that you're watching Thomas the Train?
Huh.
And he's like, no, butt face, get out. And I'm like, is he embarrassed? Like, I don't know if he has that feeling or not. But, so there's just so many things I don't know, but I'm getting to know him better. I came in last night with a face full of makeup on. I'd been on television and he was like, why is your face painted? And then this morning he said, Mommy, you are back to normal. So it's like, I would
Yeah.
have never thought a year ago he would have said that.
Right.
So it's really fun to count those successes with him that I didn't have the wherewithal to count with my other children. I just expected this is how everybody develops and this is what life is. And then having this fourth child be very different. In the book is we have very different profiles in different birth orders. I'm the only one with the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
Swenson's son is nonverbal. He's the oldest. He's 14. And I've realized I've met Cooper several times. Nonverbal does not mean non-communicative.
Yeah.
I feel like he and I can have conversations. He's funny. So just even learning, you're reading the book and thinking, okay, well, that's different than I thought it was.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then Carrie's child is the second of 5, and he is in a supported college program. So that's interesting. I think we're kind of hitting somewhere along the spectrum for everybody.
Well, and that is a word, right, that gets kind of tossed around, not just when it comes to autism diagnoses, but even love on the spectrum, right? Like that. So will you just explain a little bit about what that word spectrum means in relation to autism?
Yeah. So spectrum is this wide range of things. I guess I kind of picture a scatter plot, my nerdy self.
Yeah.
But, a common question people will say is like, why is there more autism today? When Amos was diagnosed 8 years ago, it was 1 in 64. Today, I think it's 1 in 36. And my dad, if you have somebody that's almost 80, that could be a whole podcast of talking to them about disabilities. It would probably be very interesting. But, he's learning too. And so it's like, well, where did it come from? And I think back in the day, people were just considered to be intellectually disabled. They used the R word back then. Or maybe you had the strange, quirky uncle, and maybe that uncle now would have the diagnosis. So I think Asperger's was a separate diagnosis than autism. So I think things are kind of getting put together. It's a spectrum. I mean, it is, and it's hard. I don't know if I love it as a mother because there can be a lot of maybe bickering. I have autistic adults that might say to me, well, you don't know that he's not going to get married, or you don't know this. And I think that can be really hard for a mom who's changing diapers of a 20-year-old.
Right.
To be scolded about there's a chapter in the book on caregiving versus motherhood and really the difference in those two things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I always say you can't tell anybody how they feel. So everybody's feelings are valid. And there is a chapter on grief. I grieved big time. It was 8 years ago last week, and I had lost my only sibling to cancer. And I remember just feeling decimated. And I thought, I had no idea you could grieve something that wasn't cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody has something in their life that this is not what they planned. This was not in my playbook. But it's a good life, right? Like I wouldn't trade it for somebody else's life. So it's a lot of feelings to wrap your mind around.
Well, that's one of the things I really appreciated about the book and about your writing is just that sense of I am not going to land on kind of one side or the other of either toxic positivity or this terrible thing that happened to my family. And I think about, I teach a workshop called Reimagining Family Life with Disability. And in the last session of that workshop, we write down, like as a way to start thinking about the future, we write down what's good and what's hard right now. And I wanted to ask you, because I think you do that pretty naturally, both throughout the book in terms of your own journey, and you've referenced some of that like I felt differently about it years ago than I do now. So it evolves. But why do you think it matters that we talk about both the good and the hard when it comes to our kids with disabilities?
Amy Julia, I didn't know any families like mine. I went to private school. I lived in a small town. I didn't know anybody with a disability. And so when I was an adult, I saw families like mine or like yours, and I felt awe, but I also felt pity.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started this journey of writing, I just thought either I wasn't listening or people weren't talking, and probably a little bit of both.
Hmm.
And so it's really important for me, and not a way of like whining or complaining or needing attention, but I wish I had known more. Like, disabilities aren't bad,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It's different and it's hard. But running a marathon looks difficult. You're not seeing me do it, but people really like it, right?
Yeah.
What good comes from something easy?
Mm-hmm.
Life, nothing. I mean, we all know the people that it looks like things have been pretty easy, and they're not exactly fun people to spend an afternoon with.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that years ago, when we were working on getting Amos's genetic diagnosis, we knew there were some kind of differences with him. And I knew at 10 days old, he was different. He didn't smile. And I just knew, this mother's instinct is really strong. And I speak a lot about that. But I remember saying to my daughter, which I probably shouldn't have, but I couldn't help myself. She was about maybe 6. And I said, because I was thinking, like, if it's a genetic thing and it's going to be passed down, what does that mean? And wanting the children to know, just all these thoughts, right? And I said to her, as she was a little girl, what would you do if you had a baby like Amos? And she said, well, I would be excited. And somebody said, well, she's 6. And I said, well, she knows what life is like with Amos better than anyone. Like your family, everybody knows. My son Thomas came on the other day and he said, Mom, you're really a chemist. We were talking about medications and changing things. And he said my favorite chapter was anxiety, because I've really seen the difference that medicine has made for our family, for Amos, and kind of being able to navigate lots of things. So I think now, if I got that diagnosis, or one of my children had a child with a diagnosis, just life, I wouldn't feel pity.
Hmm. Yeah.
I would be like, you can do hard things. You're going to be able to do this, and you're going to love this person. And this person you're not going to trade them for anybody else.
Right.
And I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with everything you just said as far as just our own experience, and both in terms of getting to know Penny, but also being introduced to the world of people with disabilities, where it's not just that I've been able to have her in my life, but I also feel so much more open-heartedness. As you were saying, was it Cooper who you were saying is nonverbal,
Yes.
but that doesn't mean non-communicative. That's something
Right.
that I have learned. And I guess I've just, through this almost, for me now, 20 years, I have come to really believe that everyone can communicate. And that is really much easier for me with the words that I'm able to speak. True.
Right.
But to just assume competence and connection in terms of communication, even though what that might mean for me is saying, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you just said. Could you repeat it?
Mm-hmm.
Or, being patient with a device that is going to tell me words in a different way than I'm used to receiving them. Or I'm paying attention to facial expressions or noises or other ways of communication. All of that is actually like an expansion of who I am. Although it as long as I can get over my own sense of like discomfort or my need for efficiency, then there's like human connection that actually expands who I am in this like really beautiful way.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. It's been a few years ago, and I said that particularly my dad, like, this has just been and I don't know if you have the same story, but it has not come naturally to him. And it's been several years ago, but Amos went through a phase where we would break a lot of TVs. So he took the remote and he pinged the TV. And my dad said he did that on purpose. And, he was thinking of like a typical child does something naughty,
Yeah.
I said, yeah, he did it on purpose. But what is he telling us?
Right. What was the purpose?
Right. And so it was like, oh, okay. I think you really are learning of what's this behavior telling me all the time, hence the chemist. label.
Right. Well, and that's where I did find the anxiety chapter also particularly helpful in thinking through. And actually, I don't remember if it was you or one of your co-authors who distinguished between a meltdown and a tantrum, where a tantrum actually is a very specific, I want this and I'm not getting it, essentially.
Yes.
And a meltdown is the context that I've been placed in is so overwhelming that I can't function. And being able, first of all, that's just a helpful distinction because we use those terms, I think, often almost interchangeably. And yet also as adults, I don't know, I rarely throw tantrums. I do feel like I melt down sometimes, and just that sense of like, oh, you're overwhelmed. Like there's so much compassion that can come from that. And I loved, this was either Carrie or Kate, I can't remember, one of your co-authors, writing about how what she needed to do in order for actually behaviors at school to change was create a really orderly environment at home. Where it was just like, we're taking down the stimuli and it's predictable and you can feel like safe here. And that, I don't know, it was just really, again, helpful for me as a mom. And I think this is true of like many, many kids. It's just that kids, whether it's with Down syndrome, with autism, with anxiety, I've said this a gazillion times, they are magnifying glasses. It's like, we just see it more clearly and there's no getting around it. That like, I can't do, whether it's the grocery store or the whatever, without melting down today. And how can we respond to that? Not as, oh my gosh, you're a bad kid, or I can't believe you're responding this way, but instead with some compassion, and making some different choices about how our world is ordered.
Yeah. And that the planning. Yes. Carrie talked about how she would make sure she made his bed every day so that he could kind of get into this, which we all love, right? If you go to a hotel and you get to climb in these nice clean sheets, it's not like home too often at my house. There's like a cat and a dog and some Fruit Loops or something, sand. She would like candles at the dinner table. For Amos, we, get home from school, we go to McDonald's. This is not probably a kudos to my parenting. And he comes in and he gets like settled and he has a ball pit in front of a television. I mean, it's really a scene over here.
Yeah.
And he sits in that ball pit and just, kind of gets calm. Right.
Yeah.
And it's nice to value like those things help. Or days that, you realize, I don't know if you had this experience with Penny, but like, I know our limits are like, maybe we can go one place, where with the other kids, it'd be like, we're going to go to 5 places. Well, you sort of realize like, I have to be so aware of trying to navigate and set up the world for success. Like whenever we kind of had struggles lately, I'm like, we did too much.
Yep.
Well,
and I've been returning lately to the idea of just slowing down. And in fact, I was doing some teaching this weekend in an Episcopal church up here in Connecticut, and was just reminded of that verse from the Bible where Paul is describing love and says love is patient. And just that idea of what you're describing of like, you know what, I might have 3 errands I need to run. And what it means for me to do that with Amos is to only do 1 today. Right. Like, and there's a patience required, but I think that actually moves backwards towards the love that is actually being grown in you, in being like, okay, I am like, essentially, it sounds so silly, but like I am sacrificing my need for whatever it was I was going to just run into CVS and get, in order to honor this person that I'm with today. And there's, I think, something really beautiful that grows when we start actually being patient with each other and with our needs instead of just like forcing our way through the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I was saying to one of my co-authors yesterday, I said, if there was a book I'd like to write and it sort of ties into that is you can't have it all.
Yeah.
You can't have it all. You can't do it all. You can't be it all. And, finding that space for yourself and modeling that. The other night we had a speaking, we had 200 people coming, we were sharing the book, and it started at 5:00. And my followers particularly are a little bit older, probably later 50s, early 60s, according to, Facebook demographics. Well, those people are prompt. Not only are they prompt, they come early.
Totally.
So I am not early. I am like Edenton. Edenton. We're like 30 minutes late is considered polite, right? And so Amy Julia had that experience with me today. And I walked in to a sea of people, 30 people. One person was lying down on the floor because she was tired. You know what I mean? And I was like, I can't do this. It's so funny. I didn't even think about it till you just said it. I removed myself.
Yeah.
I walked next door to the hotel lobby and I just sat. I actually did a video with my subscribers. I kind of went through the day and I walked in at 5 and my co-author was like, "Where have you been?" I was like, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
You know, like I knew my limitations, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
so even the last few months with this book and all these things happening, you know, I've let myself and said to myself, okay, you're going to manage children and you're going to sell this book and you're not going to do anything else. We're not going to worry about the taxes are going to go late this year.
Yeah.
I'm not going to clean out a closet. I mean, I have
Right.
a real penchant for doing things like that. And I like drug some stuff out the other day and I just shoved it back. I was like, nope, you're not allowed to do that. You
Right.
know,
Right. Yeah.
being kind to yourself is really important.
Yeah. Having a child with very obvious limitations has helped me to be much more gentle with my own limitations instead of pretending that they don't exist.
Right. Right.
One thing I wanted to ask about was your experience in Edenton, North Carolina. And it is, again, a very small southern town, Eastern North Carolina. I feel a particular fondness for the place and the people there. But I also think that anyone who reads this book is going to get a sense of the kindness and community that it brings and into your life. And I think that's a really important part of your story in particular is being connected to a community, needing a community, and also cultivating trust within that community. So I just wanted to get a sense of like, how have you done that? Because one of the things that again comes up in your book, but also in other literature around disability is the isolation that is so easy to experience. So like, how have you stayed connected to community? Has that been a challenge? Has it been easy? Like, can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I think I go back to that geneticist saying the most important thing you can do is be PTA president.
Yeah, will you actually speak a little bit about why, like, in case there are listeners who are like, I don't understand. Like, what does that mean?
Right. Well, I think it just meant, you know, you often hear there's always this contentious relationship with school systems and there's advocates and patient
Yes.
advocates. And I have always approached it when she said that to me. I made the decision I'm going to give twice as much as I ask. And granted, I have the time and ability and the wherewithal to do those things. So that doesn't mean everyone can do that on their schedules, but I can. And so recognizing what you can do. So for me, it might be doing a fundraiser or taking papers home at night and stapling them and wanting the teachers to feel like they could depend on me. I think the benefit, my co-authors, very different situations. One is in Minnesota. Minnesota has some of really one of the best states for care for people with disabilities. Like they have a wait list for the waiver. If you're not familiar, the waiver for unmet needs for people with disabilities, we've been on the waiver wait list now for 8 years in North Carolina. And then my friend Carrie is in New Hampshire, and her son was referred out of district to a special school for kids with disabilities, but he graduated with a diploma.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have one school, you know, we have elementary, middle, and high school.
Yeah.
And so where we are, what we have has to work. There is no plan B. There is no option C.
Yeah.
And I hate to say something's best because their experiences have been really good and they might say, well, she doesn't know because she's never had another experience. But I think in the big picture of the earth from far away, what our experience is best when it comes to inclusion and incorporating people with disabilities in our world. Because if I want Amos to function and thrive in a world that I'm not going to be here forever, how do I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Then he has to be in the world.
Yeah.
We can't just say, oh, I'll show up at Special Olympics, you know, one day and everything's great. Like people have to experience him. I'm always juggling. And I don't know if it's because of what you and I both do, but like he is first. But almost equally important to me is that his peers have a chance to be with him,
Yeah.
because it's so important. And I will say Amos has real friends at school. Amos is not a good friend. I would just like to say that.
Hmm.
I have not seen him offer a lot for a friendship. He, takes more than he gives, but he has real friends. He had a birthday party. I think 9 from his class came. You hear like these children have birthday parties and nobody comes, but
Hmm.
like he's a part of things. And
Yeah.
as his mom, I show up at school. I bring the cupcakes. My daughter Blair is kind of my assistant director. Evidently, she's like, he needs to be wearing Under Armour. You've got to stop putting him in those, shirts because he looks like a baby. I ordered some things. They're in my office today, and I was like, that's so cute. But Blair is going to be like, oh my gosh, that's so inappropriate. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
all the things of how you fit in the community. And I think Edenton, when I realized, Amy Julia, to be honest, I was drowning in fear of what this life was going to look like when I was like, he's 2. I think he was about 2.5 when I started writing. And I'd like to say that I wanted to help the community, but I didn't. I wanted to help myself. I knew I couldn't bury any more hurt. I had been shoving hurt. I lost my brother. And
Yeah.
I just decided, well, that's that. And I'm just going to move on. And I was happy. I had 4 children and a husband, but I didn't have joy because I had been shoving this hurt down.
Hmm.
So when I started writing, I grieved a lot in the beginning, really, for my brother. And this joy came back. And the other point of why I started writing was I didn't, and this is not, again, this doesn't reflect well on me, but it's true. I didn't want anybody in the community, in my very small community, talking about us and whispering about us.
Yeah.
I wanted to feel like I could control the rhetoric.
Hmm.
So if I put the truth out there, and even when he was 4 months old, we had started genetic testing. I sent a mass email and I was like, we're doing genetic testing. We have some concerns about Amos. And I remember a few people that emailed me back and they were like, you're so brave to share that.
Yeah.
And it was like, no, I'm not. I don't ever want to feel like there's pity, like
Yep.
I want to own my own story. So in Edenton, it is really 99% positive. And I think part of it is us sharing our story.
Yeah.
I think, people will say, well, it's fine for you to share, but I'm private. Well, I would argue that sharing is really the only way we're going to make progress. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth. I mean, we are going to have to share to help people raise themselves up to be more kind and considerate. I got a message pretty early in my journey from a mother. And she said, I just wanted you to know my mother loves your blog. Every day she texts me and she's like, did you see what the debutante wrote today? And she's like, yes, Mom, I have Facebook. I saw it. But she said last weekend, and you'll know this, Amy Julia, they had gone to the Angus Barn in Raleigh, right? Monumental restaurant. And her son was 12 with autism. And the Angus Barn is busy and loud, like a family birthday. And he immediately kind of started getting agitated. And the mother said, I'm just going to take him outside. And she said, for 12 years, my mother has never really connected with him. And her mother said, why would you do that? He's fine. And she was like, it came from you.
Right.
Talking about the little boy at Mamacita's while the waiters step over him while he's rolling on the floor and nobody's batting an eye.
Yep.
So we've got to share and we've got to be out in the community. And it doesn't mean sometimes you're going to get burned. I got burned a few weeks ago. Somebody called the police on me because Amos was, roaming around the grocery store and rolling on the floor, and somebody decided I wasn't parenting appropriately,
Right.
and we followed up and had some great conversations. And I think now that person would be like, oh, they're okay.
Right.
So it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy, but it's important.
I love that. And I felt like reading your portions of the book and following along with your posts online, you've given so many different examples of people who have been for you and your family. And I'm thinking about, there was one story in the book where Amos was getting very dysregulated. Like you couldn't go to basketball games in town
Right.
together.
Yes.
Will you tell that story about kind of where that landed?
Well, there've been a few, but I think I
Okay.
did one in the book. So if you grow up in Eastern North Carolina, and particularly in Edenton, we live on the water. In January and February, they are wet and cold and windy and dark. I
Yeah.
mean, when I say dark, it's dark. Like when we moved here, I was like, where are we? Like, I feel like I'm in like an apocalypse kind of place. But anyway, so church basketball is a big activity. Was it like that when you were growing up here?
Big activity. Yes.
So that's what you had to look forward to. All, weekend, you had church on Sunday and church basketball Saturday night. You go, you get a hot dog for $1. You can feed the whole family for like $12. And you talk to people and hang out. Well, my husband was gone hunting and my children they all played church basketball and loved it. And I didn't have a sitter for Amos because we had pretty early on realized that there were a lot of things that we were going to have to split up to do.
Yeah.
And that's been very important to me. I think more even than my co-authors of really wanting my children, and maybe because we had kind of 7 years of typical familyhood, and I don't know if I'm doing it right, but I just want them to have this existence where the squeaky wheel isn't the one that always gets the grease.
Yep. I do.
And so we went to church basketball because they were like excited to go. And we got in there and, immediately the buzzer goes off. And so he's in the bathroom. We're in the bathroom together. Nobody was unkind. It was like, I got him some cookies. He sat in the bathroom and ate cookies. And I kind of stood in the doorway and watched basketball. And then actually 2 years ago, one of the churches spent 2 hours figuring out how to unhook the buzzers.
That to me was actually the detail that just did me in, where I was like, wait, they just decided not to have the buzzers because it was like, but we want Amos to be here. I mean, just that kind of the assumption being, well, it would be better to have him here than it would be to not. I just thought that was so beautiful because you also were not on some crusade demanding that this be a place where your son didn't have to listen to buzzers. Right. But at the same time, there was a sense of but we want him to be here and we want him to know he belongs here. I don't know. I just thought that little detail of we're going to just not have buzzers felt really beautiful and profound to me as far as what it might look like for a community to say, welcome. We're here together.
And I think what I would say to a family or to a church is, one, look for ways to be inclusive or a restaurant. But I think we also, families sometimes, particularly mothers, will come up to me and say, I don't have that. Well, you're going to have to start it. Right. I shared my heart with a member of that church whose daughter is a good friend of Amos's, and he's gone to her house for play dates. And I revealed to her, I said, I would really like to go to church basketball, but we can't because of the buzzer. And I don't want to be a pain, but I would really like for him to have that experience.
Yeah.
And she was like, I'm going to find out, so I had to be willing. I had to say something too, not in a, like you said, crusader way, but I had to share my heart and be vulnerable, which is not easy.
Yep. Totally.
But people don't know how to help us if we don't tell them.
Right. Right. And what I've also found is that when we are honest about vulnerabilities and needs in community, that often opens up other people feeling more able to take the risk of doing the same thing. There's a real beautiful kind of flow that can happen there. And I guess the last thing on this topic I wanted to ask you about had to do with the school system, because I do feel like there's narrative among parents of kids with disabilities in terms of needing to kind of armor up when it comes to schools. And you and I have had really similar experiences. Penny also grew up in a very small town in Connecticut, but still 3,000 people where we had to make it work. And there certainly were times where I thought she should have been getting something she wasn't getting. But on the whole, it was I want to approach this as though we are a team caring together for this child. So I just wanted to ask you about that. How have you done anything intentional to cultivate trust and kind of a sense of being on Amos's team together within the school system? Because it seems to me like there might be a lot of parents who are in that position and who've been told actually something opposite of trust your school, be on a team with them, be the PTA president, etc.
Right. Yeah, I have tried to be intentional. I give cash for Christmas presents. I don't know if that's, I'm like, nobody wants a mug, even if you give somebody $5,
Yes. Yes.
But I mean, in all seriousness, I try to be uplifting and helpful, and I recognize that I'm able to. So because of what I do naturally, if somebody says, "Hey, we want to give you some Legos," I'm like, "Great, I'm going to give them to school."
Mm-hmm.
I'm always trying to, or ask teachers, like, "I appreciate you. What can I do for your classroom?" And again, we all have different skill sets and abilities, and maybe you're not available in the daytime, but maybe at night you could staple papers. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's saying, "I value you and I appreciate you." Maybe you just send an email once a month and say thank you. Um, I I had an experience a few years ago, and I don't know the answers either, right? And so I go into it like, I don't know. When you have an IEP, this individualized education plan for people with disabilities, I think there's this thought that the parent is the expert, but I'm not. I mean, if I knew the right thing to do, I would do it, but I
Yes.
don't know
Yes.
either, right? Like,
Right.
it's so funny to me, like, well, what do you want? I'm like, what? How do I know?
Yeah.
So I think saying that, I don't know, but I don't know, maybe he was in the first grade and COVID had happened, and he was kind of assigned to a traditional classroom, but he was really spending most of the day in the EC classroom. And there was a field trip in the typical classroom, and he didn't go.
Mm.
And it was a few weeks later that I really, like, kind of made me sad. And I made a point and said, that made me really sad. Like, I really have realized that I do want him to be a part of things,
Yeah.
because we had this experience in pre-K. So I knew what it felt like and what it was like for him. And the principal at the time said to me, "When we know better, we do better."
Hmm.
And I really appreciated her being willing to be vulnerable with me, but
Yeah.
I had to model it, I think, first in some
Yeah.
ways,
Yeah.
and so then the next year came about, and I said, "Here's what I want for him. And can we just try it? And if it doesn't work, let's go back to the drawing board." And I think they've always been willing to listen, and hopefully, there's some things that maybe I hadn't loved, but I let some things go too. Like right now, I want PE to be outside
Hmm.
because the gym is too loud for Amos.
Yeah.
Well, PE coaches in North Carolina do not want to be outside. I don't know what in the world it is, but it's like a real thing. But I've kind of let that go, right? Like,
Right.
I have to
Yes.
kind of pick and choose. And I said to the teacher the other day, "Well, do you think they could do one day a week?" Just like, I just always being respectful. And I don't know if that's the right thing, but I'm in this for the long haul.
Right. No,
Right.
I had a similar approach where there were things that I would ask for and they wouldn't really come through the way I expected or wanted them to be. But I felt like it was really important to, first of all, for me to name what was going well in terms of the relationships with Penny and her classmates and her teachers and et cetera. And to be very particular, like if there were really important things, like that's all I'm going to focus on rather than, yeah, just kind of majoring in the majors, I guess. And I appreciate your attitude and example and all the different stories you were just able to share there. I have one final question for you. I loved there was this one point in the book where you said, I'm quoting back to you, "Who have I become? I ask myself and find that I rather like this new person." And so I just wanted to end by asking you to talk about, who is the new person that you've become as Amos's mom, and how have you become that person, and what do you like about her?
I think you make me cry twice in a podcast. um, I, I'm just so thankful for the perspective. I feel like I've just gotten this behind the scenes tour of the real beauty of life. And there's a chapter in the book about success. And I don't know if you were raised like this, but I tend to think so. I was raised with a very clear definition of what success was. And I was given these opportunities for an education. And I really worked hard towards this goal and was pushed towards, this is what success is. You're going to work hard. You're going to achieve it. And I did. And suddenly we have this little person, and success is going to look very different, and I didn't know there was another definition for success.
Yeah.
And one of the first things, and I write about it, is when Amos, he either ate with a spoon or drank from a cup. I think they both happened. He was maybe 3 or 4. And my older son, who was about 10, started crying because he was so excited. And it was like, wow, like my children have been given this window that I didn't get until I was in my 40s. And I'm so thankful, because their life is just so much richer. And you don't want to be like, well, I'm glad we had somebody with a disability because we're all wonderful because of it. But like,
Yeah.
They are good humans. And I think my community, people at my church, Amos's classmates, like, they are going to go into the world and they're going to be good humans, and I think Amos, he was created to be on this planet,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm so thankful to be an advocate. I'm thankful for, I don't know what's next. I can't tell you. Middle school sort of gives me some angst, but I'm not going to sit around and worry about it. And as one of my co-authors loves to get, she'll be like, and I'm like, well, I cannot worry about things that I can't do anything about. Like,
Right.
I have let that go,
Yeah.
like I just
Yeah.
am doing the best I can. I often say, teasing, but serious, like, if my children turn out terrible, I follow all these news stories and it's like somebody's child was awful and the parents are like, they're wonderful. That ain't me. I'm going to be like, they're terrible. And I just want you to know I did the best I could. I feel no guilt if someone is awful, because I tried, and
Yeah.
in everything I do, I think to myself, did you do the best you can? Did you make a good decision? And it doesn't mean I always do, but for the most part, I'm really doing the best I can.
Yeah.
And I have to feel good about that, So anyway, I don't know who I am now. I'll be 50 tomorrow, which is
Happy birthday.
Thanks. I'm really
Yeah.
excited about being 50. My husband and I were dating at my mother's 50th birthday party. So I've had to sort of say, Adrian, you have an 11-year-old and your mother had a 25-year-old. So this is a lot different. But, my life is always going to be filled with children. I don't think there'll ever be a time where I don't have somebody living here or people coming back to visit. And, I'm just along for the ride.
Well, so are we. And thank you for taking us on that ride with you. And I do, for anyone who's loved getting a little glimpse into the way you think and approach things in your family life, I will point them to, again, Autism Out Loud, your book, but also to Tales of an Educated Debutante on social media and YouTube. So thank you so much for just sharing your story and your thoughts with us here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Anytime.
Thanks, as always, for listening to this episode of Reimagining the Good Life. And we have got more good things ahead. Again, I'll be speaking in Bethel, Connecticut for Reimagining Family Life with Disability. That's on May 3rd. I would love to see you there in person. I'm also excited for what's ahead on this podcast. We have a conversation with Kara Meredith about her new book, Church Camp, and also an upcoming conversation with Miroslav Volf about his book, The Cost of Ambition. I am really excited to talk with both of them and share their ideas with you. I always love hearing from you, so please send questions, send suggestions, share this conversation, rate, review it, and be in touch. It's amyjuliabeckerwriter@gmail.com. And finally, I want to thank Jake Hansen for editing this podcast. I always want to say thank you to Amber Beery, my social media coordinator. She does everything behind the scenes to get this out in so many different formats. And finally, I'm thankful that you are here, that you're paying attention to these important stories and ideas that I do believe make our world a better place. I hope that this conversation has helped you to challenge assumptions, proclaim belovedness, and envision a world of belonging. where everyone matters. Let's reimagine the good life together.